All right. You ready to like get this thing rolling?
Yeah, we probably should.
Okay, because I want to point out that it is no longer summer. And you know what that means, Daniel?
That's a good point. What does it mean?
There's something different right now. Can you tell what it is?
I can tell what it is, but our listeners can't because they can't see us.
Exactly. I'm currently wearing a shirt.
Big step.
Have not taken off my shirt because it's no longer shirtless summer.
Yeah.
It's over. It's sweater season. I'm not wearing a sweater because it's still 1,000 degrees outside. But out of respect for the seasons, keeping my shirt on.
That sounds good. I mean, as long as we're not moving into like pantsless fall or something, then I think that's great.
TBD.
Yeah, let's just keep all the clothes on for the duration of the podcast and everything will be fine.
All right, sure.
What's this thing on here about Lightroom?
Okay, this is almost a show topic. I'm like wondering if maybe we should roll the intro and then talk about this because I know that we have a lot of stuff on the docket, but I really need to talk about this. And I was going to talk about it to you earlier, and I was like, I'm just going to save this for the podcast.
You want to talk about cameras in the Camera Gear podcast?
It's more about Lightroom, but yeah.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
So we've talked in past about my photo backup workflow.
In depth.
Yep. And I don't think it's changed significantly. I don't know how easy it is to link that episode. If we need to like point people back to whatever it was, 48 or 32 that was about. Those are both wrong.
Yeah, it was like episode 5 or something.
No,
we'll put the number of that episode in the show notes.
Sure. Okay. So previous episode talked about my photo backup workflow. I'm currently using Lightroom Classic for my photo editing, and I bought an iPad, and so I'm using the iPad with regular Lightroom.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what that workflow looks like. I have my photos on my camera. I plug my SD card of my camera into my iPad. I ingest the photos. They sync with Lightroom, and then they go into Lightroom's cloud stuff, and they take up my 20 gigs of allocated storage. And then I go onto my computer, and I copy them from Lightroom Cloud to my catalog, which downloads them and puts them into the appropriate folder on my computer. And then I delete that collection so that it's no longer in the cloud. And then I recreate the exact same collection, and then I put the photos that I just took out of it back into it, because then it will upload the smart previews that don't count against my Lightroom storage. And so then I can go back onto my iPad later and have all the edits still there and still be able to make further tweaks to those photos if I want to and still see them, but they're no longer in the cloud as full res. They're just the smart previews. And if I want to export the full res, I have to then do that on my computer. But I still have full control of my photos because all my photos are on my computer, which is then within my backup workflow where I'm using rsync to then mirror it to the server, and the server's backing up on Backblaze, and it's all like within my folder structure.
Lucas, all of that sounds terrible.
So
you telling me you do that every time you edit photos on your iPad?
Yes.
That's too much, man.
It's not that much.
Way too much.
It's not that much. So like it's on my iPad, and all I'm doing is copying them from one location to the other and then back.
But you're like remaking the collection and all that.
That's not. It's like just like new, man. And then I name it again. It's less work than it sounds like. But what I'm wondering is, has the time come that I should just go all in on regular Lightroom? And I was thinking about like, what does this look like for me? And just pensively wondering, like, can I be that kind of person?
Yeah. I mean, what's stopping you?
Okay. There's two things stopping me. One is the location of my master library of like what I consider to be my canonical photo library. Like, where is that and where does it live and what is it? And right now that is on my server. There is a directory of pictures or photos, whatever it's called. And like, there's all of my photos and organized by year, by month, and what, or subject, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. And that's it. And Lightroom points at it, and Google Photos upload points at it, and it's backed up and like, to an external drive and to Backblaze, and it's on the server, and like that, there it is. If I switched to Lightroom not Classic, Lightroom wants to consider my master photo library to be the cloud, to be Adobe's servers. I do have the option to like check a box and say, keep a full copy of this locally. And so the interesting idea would be that if I did that, I could run Lightroom on my server,
right,
which is the Windows computer in a closet,
and basically have it mirror your library
and have
locally.
It always download all the stuff locally, and then there it is. I run the risk of if something screwed up on Adobe's side, it could nuke my photo library because like it's not air gapped or whatever from Adobe. It's like now within the process.
Well, but you could solve on the server thing. You could solve that,
right? So like I will obviously have the external drive that I am pointing to that directory and saying, sync. I like sync toys running every week basically. So it's like on a week interval, I have some 7-day backup against that directory, and then also I have Backblaze running, which is going to give me like here's a 30-day snapshot of that directory as well. So like there are those backups, and so I'm thinking like, maybe that's okay. Like maybe I can rely on those and then just trust that Adobe isn't going to screw me and kill my photo library. And then also, I guess I'm backing those up to Google Photos as well, but I'm not backing up the RAWs to Google Photos. I'm only doing the JPEGs, and that's because I just want to be able to like see them anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, you have to put your trust in something at some point. Like when you have your local photo library, you're putting your trust in your own computer to not break. And that is also a form of trust, right? Like trusting Adobe to not nuke your library requires one form of trust, and trusting your own computer is another form of trust. So the only way around these things is to back stuff up, and you're doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So like I'm mostly sold on like this could work. Maybe this is what I need to do. It would then open up the ability for me to ingest photos on my computer or on my iPad, and then they just go into Lightroom Cloud, and then that syncs down to the server. And everything is hunky and dory, and we're great.
Yep.
So like maybe that works, and then I don't have to go through this whole rsync process.
Yeah.
I will have to figure out how to get those into. Okay, so like there's another part of my photo backup workflow where any pictures that I take on my phone are synced or uploaded to OneDrive, and then I will periodically go into that folder on OneDrive and like delete out all the screenshots and the stuff that I don't want to go into my master photo library. Because there needs to be like a checkpoint there. And so I'll check those, delete all the stuff I don't need. And then I will run an automator script, which is written in Apple script, to sort those into a folder structure into my photo library. And it'll just automatically like put them over there. And then they get ingested in through that method. So I don't know what I'd do about Lightroom for that. I guess I would have to import them into Lightroom.
I guess so. There's no automatic way to do that, like on the phone app?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess I could back them up into Lightroom from my phone directly.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Then you could remove another part of your process.
That would save me some effort. Okay. All right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Some tempting ideas here, right. I think.
So here's the one other big snag, which maybe not so much of a snag, times two. One is it's 1 terabyte. So I did check. I'm at like 630 gigs of photos. So like this is probably good for another.
You have some breathing room there.
Yeah. So like 5 years probably at most. I've been doing like 20 to 30 gigs of photos a year.
Yeah, but you haven't bought that GFX2 yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. I have been thinking that maybe I need an XT5. Different topic.
Yes,
Sorry.
Let's put that one off.
Yeah, we got to get through this, Daniel. We've been talking about Lightroom for an hour.
Yep.
In Lightroom Normal, you can't stack JPEGs and RAWs. Whereas in Lightroom Classic, you can use the JPEG as the cover for the RAW. And like if I was like a Sony shooter or a Canon shooter or a Panasonic shooter or like I don't know, is that all of them? No. Or an Olympus shooter or like a Pixie shooter or a Leica shooter. Then I would just shoot RAW and it'd be great. And I can just ingest the RAW photos and be fine.
Yeah.
But because I shoot Fuji and there's the film simulations and Lightroom's copy of the film simulations don't always look exactly like the film simulation. And if you're happy with the one out of camera, it's not worth going through the effort of editing the RAW because the camera, like the one out of the camera is just going to look better. It's going to have better like demosaicing in general. And so I shoot both and I generally keep both, which kind of a problem for storage. So like I need to rethink my life in that term as far as deleting the ones that I don't want. And if I decide I want to keep a JPEG, deleting the RAW out of my library, which is scary. But I'm like, point is, I'm using both. And so I can't, like, if you're like going through and like culling photos and like looking for the bad ones and deleting them out of the library and that sort of thing, you're having to like look at every photo twice. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that life. I would rather look at the JPEG version of the photo, and then if I decide to edit it, edit the RAW version, which is what the workflow is in Classic. And it's been like 3 years, and they still haven't added the like use the JPEG as the cover for the RAW photo. And I don't know if it's because they're trying to get people to not save all the JPEGs, so they don't like save on server costs for Adobe, maybe just because like out of pure annoyance, or if that's like not going to be a supported workflow method, or they just haven't gotten to it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It is kind of strange that they don't have that. I don't hit that problem because I very rarely edit the RAWs myself. I just use the JPEGs most of the time.
And then you just like dump the RAWs.
Yeah, typically.
Yeah, I think I do need to be a little more aggressive about if I'm never going to edit the RAW, delete the RAW.
Yeah, it kind of feels to me like you would,
wrong.
But it feels like you would know if they're RAWs you want to edit or not.
Yeah.
You know, if you go on your big vacation, then maybe you want to save those. But if it's just random pictures that you take around the house, do you really need to save those?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Honestly, like generally what I'll do is I have within the year, like 2023, I'll have all of my photos by month, like 01, 02, 03, 04. And then if I do something outside of that, like here was this trip or here was this birthday thing, or like, you know, I'll put like, you know, Pecos, Texas when I went to Pecos or something. And then like all the photos for that will be in that folder under that name. And that's usually where my RAWs live. If it was like just kind of around the house and I just shot a bunch of pictures, I'll grab the JPEGs and I'll put them in the month folder.
Yeah.
Because those are not like official fancy photos.
Yeah.
Like they're more documentation, I guess.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
What do you think, Daniel? Like, should I make the jump and like switch my life over to Lightroom Normal?
I kind of think you should. I've been using Lightroom Normal for a long time because it simplifies my life, I feel like. And I mean, it was just the newer application. I figure eventually they're going to deprecate Classic. And so I was just like, I'm just going to take this on and just use it. And I think it's fine. I mean, the user interface was a little weird to get used to at first, but I can do everything I need to do in it. And for you, I mean, it just seems like it would simplify your workflow so much. Like all that stuff you're doing on the iPad, it feels like a lot of that would be simpler. And I mean, you take a lot of pictures. I can't imagine doing all the stuff you're talking about with like making copies of things and doing all that. I feel like anything you're doing manually like that, you run the risk of forgetting to do it or not doing it in a timely fashion or doing it wrong. And like those are all risks in your workflow too.
It's a very good point. I don't like committing to the cloud for this sort of thing because like
But what do you mean by committing to the cloud?
Oh, you know,
how are you committed to the cloud?
I want, because like basically like me and Adobe have a different philosophy on who owns the master version of my library.
Well, but you've got your backup, your local, you're going to run on your server and get your local backup. So isn't that like, why can't that just be your master copy?
And that's a good point.
It feels like you've dealt with that side of the problem. And so like you're using Adobe as your conduit to get stuff to the server.
Right. Well, one of the other things is as part of like when I committed fully to Adobe is like I was using it just as like I'm going to edit these JPEGs and export the JPEGs. And I don't care about like what I'm doing in the RAWs and all that stuff. And I'm like getting more and more where I don't want to edit extra. I don't want to export extra JPEGs and have 3 versions of a photo. And so I'm just leaving the edits in Lightroom. And then if I ever decide that I want to export the final version of it till I get printed or something, I can do like a TIFF or a JPEG or a PNG or something, and I'll export at that time rather than just, you know, having new versions that I'm exporting. It does get a little weird with like now the versions that are in Google Photos are just the JPEG versions and not the edited versions.
That's a little strange.
But if I go full Lightroom, then I'll just look in Lightroom for my photos. And that will be where like my photo library lives as far as like, oh, I want to show someone a picture. I'll pull up Lightroom instead of Google Photos.
Yeah. Oh man, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
Pulling up Lightroom to show someone a photo.
I don't know. It's like a philosophy change. It feels like I don't know. I'm going like I'd be going all in, and I have started like backing up my Lightroom catalog and backing up like to backplays and all this sort of thing, the actual catalog itself, and that's been working okay. So I don't know. I just worry about it all.
I can tell. Well, I've given you my opinion, but I guess you're going to have to decide if you're ready to fully commit to Adobe.
I guess so. I think it gets more expensive too. I think that if you want Lightroom plus Photoshop plus Lightroom Classic, it's $10 a month.
That's what I'm paying for right now.
But if you want Lightroom regular with a terabyte of storage, it's also $10 a month, but then you don't get Photoshop.
Interesting.
I don't ever use Photoshop because I'm bad at it and I've never learned it. But I have used it previously for YouTube thumbnails because I don't feel like learning Canva.
That's a little backwards. Canva is so much easier than Photoshop.
I'm going to tell you what, I can't figure out Canva. I've tried. I'm like, I don't get it.
It's embarrassing.
I don't know what it is. Everyone uses Canva. They're like, oh, it's great. It's so easy. I can't even start a document.
You can use Photoshop, but you can't use Canva.
No, I
Love
can't.
it.
I don't know. Whatever. So you think I should do
I
it?
think you should do it.
Give up Photoshop. Just use Affinity and Canva. And
Sure. Yeah,
who
I think
who
that'd be
needs
just
Photoshop?
fine. Yep. Or you pay the extra $10 a month. I mean, that's the other option.
I mean, if I got to where I needed it, I just don't feel like I need it. I literally never use it. It's just sometimes I don't even install it on my computer with new installs.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
You say that as if you've installed Photoshop on so many new computers.
Okay. There was a period of time in the last year, which we have also discussed in this podcast, in which I had to reinstall my operating system, and then I switched computers shortly after that. So there was
good point.
2 new installs, and then anyways. And for some of those, I didn't install Photoshop because I was like, who needs it?
Yeah, who needs it?
Okay. So you think I should go full Lightroom and just blow up my whole workflow, fully commit?
Lucas, we need content for this podcast. And so, once you've gotten all that, you can walk everybody through your new photo backup workflow. I'm sure they'll all be tuning in for that.
It'll be much more simplified.
That's true. It'd be like a 10-minute topic instead of a half-hour topic.
Well, part of this workflow is there's another person who commits into the photo library, and that person's iPhone also backs up via my OneDrive to go into the folder so then I can digest and whatever.
That's extra complexity.
Yeah. I don't think that person's going to want to install Lightroom on their computer,
on
their phone.
I don't know. I mean,
I guess they could.
It's just like an app, right? I mean, what's it matter? You have to think about that. If it can just kind of run in the background and do its thing, it seems like it'd be fine.
Yeah. Okay. TBD.
Well, should we move on to some other topics?
Yeah, I was actually going to leave all of that for the pre-show.
Yep.
It was a lot. That was a lot.
I'm a little overwhelmed right now, but we're going to try and push through, find some other things we can cover here.
All right. I've been talking for 45 minutes, but I have one more update for you, kind of related to some previous shows.
Okay.
We talked about the new log profiles on the iPhone 15 Pros, and I was waiting to find out, what is the deal with this log?
Right.
And it is Rec 2020 for the gamut, and then there's an Apple log gamma curve, and that is already in DaVinci Resolve.
In 18.6 beta.
In 18.6 beta. So if you're looking for the gamma curve, it's going to be in Resolve. I assume that also means it's going to be... I'd be shocked if it wasn't already in Final Cut.
It is.
And then I don't know where Premiere is, but I'm sure they're going to have that very, very soon.
Yeah. And Apple also has a LUT for it.
Great. And so there's a LUT.
Yep.
Perfect. And so I was just wondering, what's the color space? Because S-Log 3 Gamma Cine is wider than Rec 2020. And so different cameras and et cetera are just, bigger gamuts. Rec 2020 is basically what Fuji uses. Pretty common color space. It's also the same color space for their HLG. So it sounds like they're probably just shooting in similar to HLG, but then fitting it into a log for the gamma instead of fitting it into a HLG style gamma for HDR.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. And it looks like it's pretty good so far. I mean, people have gotten the phones and been testing with them, and it seems like it doesn't do a lot of the over sharpening and extreme noise reduction and HDR color stuff that you normally see from phone cameras. And I mean, the footage looks really good.
Yeah, it does. That's what always annoys me about the iPhone footage stuff is it's trying to do all of its crazy computational things, even out exposures and whatever, and do all of its HDR. And I'm I want all that data, but just stick it in a log curve, give me all the info, do it 10-bit, and then let me grade it. And it seems like that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
I've seen a number of interesting videos of people who've taken a camera, they've taken the log footage, shot both in log, and then they went through and they did all the color matching. And because of color space transforms and all the info that's in that log profile, you can match pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little worried that it was going to be like normal iPhone footage, but just desaturated, like it was kind of like fake log, but it seems like it is actually doing different things with the camera and seems a lot better.
Yep. So I hope that we don't get a lot of I worry about people bringing the log profile into whatever software they're using and then just dragging around their contrast sliders and doing whatever.
Happen.
And you have to transform it. It's in a different color space. You can do that and make it look a certain way, but that's not really the right way to do it.
There are going to be people posting the uncorrected log files.
Oh my gosh.
And saying it's cinematic.
I'm going to need TikTok to catch up here and show people how to do color space transforms ASAP. But in the meantime, I've seen an FX30 comparison where they try to match, and then I think Manny Hopoya did a Airy one, and I guess that was Patrick Tomaso for the FX30, but basically on point as far as color matching. Good. So it makes me want a 15 Pro even more, and I'm super pumped to see the footage out of your new phone.
Yeah. I got mine recently, so I'll have to film something with it and see how it looks.
Yep, excited to try to mess with that and match it to the Fuji.
One other note on that is that if you use the Apple camera app, you have to record in ProRes, and not even ProRes LT, just like ProRes. So the files are huge.
Sure.
But if you use the Blackmagic camera app that also was recently announced, that gives you a lot more options. And so you can actually record with log in HEVC. So if you want
420 or 422?
I think it's 422. I'll have to look and see. But you also have ProRes LT, ProRes Proxy, all these other options. So I think the Blackmagic app is probably going to be the way to go for most people because you can get those, you can still get the log, but you're not shooting in these massive ProRes files.
Yeah, and then the other cool thing about the Blackmagic app is you can record, I think, in ProRes Proxy and full ProRes and have the ProRes Proxy upload to Blackmagic Cloud.
I think that's right. Yeah.
So that's cool too.
Yeah, definitely. So neat stuff all around.
All right.
Definitely excited for those new iPhones.
All good. Okay. So that was a quick update there. I just touched on the log. Let's talk about some actual gear, Daniel.
All right. What do we got?
I think, what was it? IBC was last week or something.
Yep. That is a type of root beer, and it's also some sort of camera conference.
It's also a building code.
Indeed.
Yep.
All of those things. But we're, shockingly to everyone listening to this, we're talking about the camera conference.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Surprising. Okay. Are you familiar with the Ninja 5?
I would say I'm uncomfortably familiar with the Ninja 5. I had some ups and downs with that thing.
I think we also had an episode on the Ninja 5.
I'm pretty sure we did. I think one of the first episodes of this podcast.
This is just going to be your recap podcast. Go look at the backlog. Anyway, there's a new Ninja in town, and I was like, holy cow, because I feel like as far as any product I've ever owned, the Ninja 5 is the most updated product, and that it released some number of years ago, and it's update, and now I can shoot in 6.2K RAW or whatever, and you couldn't do that whenever it released.
I never really thought about that. I guess because I didn't really follow this stuff that closely until I got one, and so I kind of just assumed they'd been coming out with these things all this time. I didn't really realize that the Ninja 5 came out in 2018.
Yeah, I was actually going to quiz you and find out if you knew. Turns out you know.
Well, I read about it today, and it's just crazy. And yeah, they've every time a new camera comes out, they're releasing new firmware and all that. And I mean that's good to see. I'm glad they updated it as much as they have.
But they released the Ninja 5 Plus, I think, a year or a year and a half ago to add more features and ability. And then they just pushed the firmware updates to the Ninja 5 regular and don't even have a reason to buy the Ninja 5 Plus.
I think there's one thing it can do that you can't do in the regular.
It's probably related to camera to cloud or something.
Like that. Our favorite feature.
Yeah. So it's the Ninja 5 and Ninja 5 Plus have been fantastic.
Yes.
They're long in the tooth. So Atomos is replacing them. I don't know if they're going to still sell the Ninja 5. It feels like maybe they should just stop making it and replace it fully.
It feels like these new things kind of supplant it.
It sure does. But even still, I assume that we're not going to get as many updates now for the Ninja 5. It's probably done. Yeah. And I hope so. That thing has lived its life.
Fair
it's
play.
Been fantastic. Yeah. Probably going to find some good deals on it.
Yeah,
and it's still really good. Anyway, and they were going now with the Ninja, which they haven't used the just straight up Ninja name since 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Ninja Ultra.
Yep, which sounds super cool, right? Ninja Ultra.
Mm-hmm. Real cool. Okay, updates for these guys. Oh, here's like headline features. Okay, you can do 8K 30p. You can do 4K 120. So those are pretty big updates. The previous Ninjas, I think, capped out at 4K 30 or like 6K 30, basically.
Yeah, something like that.
So you can really do the high frame rate stuff. Now you can get up to 120 frames per second in 4K, and that's shooting in like ProRes RAW, which is fantastic.
I think isn't it just 4K 60 for RAW?
Sorry, you're right. It's 4K 60 for RAW and 8K 30 for RAW, and that's only in the Ultra.
Yeah. But I guess with non-RAW, you can do 4K 120,
right?
8K 30,
and that's ProRes. And then you could also do like HEVC 422 10-bit.
Yep.
And they're not going to price lock you out of the HEVC anymore. You can it just comes with it.
Because the one that you and I had, the Ninja 5 that you and I have, we had to buy like $100 upgrade to get H.265, and we both found that to be worth it for like really long projects.
Right.
That kind of, I mean, it basically reduces the effective cost of these by $100.
Yeah, and so I think that they are actually more expensive. So the Ninja straight up is $800, and the Ninja Ultra is, I did that backwards. The Ninja Ultra is $800, and the Ninja is $600.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the ballpark, because I think when we got ours, I mean, the new price was somewhere between $500 and $600.
Right.
And, you know, it's always kind of hard to tell because there's sales and stuff on these things, but it's in the ballpark of the old one. Like if you count the new one as being $600, but it comes at that $100 HEVC, that's basically a $500 cost. That's about the same price as the old one.
Yeah, so basically the same price. So a lot of interest, like, you know, those are all interesting new features. Beyond that, it seems like it's basically the same thing.
It really does.
Like it's literally the same physical size and port layout, because they are like, you can use all of your Ninja 5 accessories. Which
is honestly,
with this.
That's a plus. You know, if you have a cage or something, or a case or anything like that.
Sure, that's a win. The screen, I think, is the same. It's
it seems like it.
Yeah, it's that, whatever it was, like 5.2 inch, 1080p, like 1,000 nit. I thought the other one was like 500 nits.
I don't know.
But the new one's 1,000 nits. But still, it's like, it's the same screen. It's the same resolution. It's like, even if you're shooting in 8K, you're looking at it in 1080p.
Yeah, it's a little bit,
which is always like annoying. Like, it'd be nice if it was like a 2K screen or something. But, you know, same drives, same NPF battery plates or power plates. It's like, it's literally a Ninja 5, but with better specs and probably like better processing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing they improved in this one is it comes with some new version of the Atomos, which is, you know, like the software basically. And that's kind of, I know one thing they said it had is false color, which is a good improvement. And I think to me, the software is one of the most interesting things about this, because I've always felt like, you know, the Ninja has these great capabilities of being able to record stuff in ProRes using SSDs. I mean, there's reasons to use a Ninja, but it just hasn't been as good as a monitor as using a dedicated monitor. And I always found the software to be harder to use, more confusing. It didn't have a lot of the same assist features as what you'd get on like a much cheaper monitor. That always felt really weird to me. So I'm curious if they've improved any of that with this version.
It's hard to say. I can't imagine it's a drastic improvement.
Yeah. And
I don't know if whatever Atomos 11 is coming to any of the previous, but... And I think like people were working around the false color thing with LUTs anyway. I hope that it's a better monitor, but I would just assume not. I think that the layout and the use of these monitors has been pretty static for a while.
Yeah, I mean, because I think the take that we had last time we talked about the Ninja was, you know, if you want a monitor, the Ninja is not as good as a monitor. Like you need to be justifying having it by using the ProRes recording or using the RAW recording or something like that. And so, I don't know, I'd like to see them close that gap a little bit.
Yeah, me too. It would be nice to see it as equally as good as a monitor and a recorder. But like, obviously what you're going to buy a Ninja for is recording, whether or not you're pulling footage off a video game console or you're recording RAW off of your camera or whatever. It's to extend the performance of your system. I would love to see Atomos support B-RAW, but I can't imagine Blackmagic ever getting them licenses for that because they want to sell their external recorders. And so kind of a bummer, but
it is a bummer. The Blackmagic ones are expensive too. I looked at them to see how much they are, and they start at like $800. So
yeah, it is much higher.
Yeah.
And so like, it's cool that you can shoot ProRes RAW, but like ever since we made the switch to DaVinci Resolve, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with ProRes RAW now because I'm going to have to
yeah.
process that separately and then bring it in, and I just don't want to have to deal with that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I can still see the value in shooting regular ProRes.
Yeah,
if I just
definitely.
want, like, let me throw this 1 terabyte SSD in here and I can shoot ProRes all day. That's nice. But yeah, it's a bummer that we can't use B-RAW.
Yep. And then they also released new Shoguns, which I haven't really looked up because I'm like, I don't really care much about Shoguns, but I think it's like SDI, brighter monitor, larger monitor. They're like 7 inches, that sort of thing. But I think it's basically pretty comparable to what they had before. And then with these new specs, so you can do like the 4K 60 and the 8K 30. And then if you're not doing RAW, you can do 4K 120 and that sort of thing.
Well, good to see updates here.
Yeah. So
seem reasonably priced and all that.
Yeah. So finally, we got much needed updates to these monitors, even though Atomos has been keeping them software updated pretty regularly.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Cool.
So since we've been talking about products from 2018, should we talk about Micro Four Thirds?
Nice. I've been pondering this camera. So on the same day that we talked about the iPhone and we talked about the GFX 100, the second, and what else? This was the other thing that came out that day.
So the other thing that came out that day was the Sony Burano.
That's right.
And then the Blackmagic event was like 2 days after this.
Right.
And all of that stuff ranked higher on our list than this one. But this was also announced on that same Tuesday.
Yep. So we're looking at the Panasonic G9 Mark II.
Yep.
I think, when did the original G9 come out? That was like 4 years ago or something?
That sounds about right. Yeah, because when I was looking at buying my GH5, and maybe even when I bought the GX85, which was 2018, I feel like they had like the G85 and the G9 came later. So yeah, somewhere around like 2019 or so, probably.
So as far as Panasonic's Micro Four Thirds lineup, the G9 and the GH, whatever. Sorry, the G and the GH have essentially been TikTok to each other. One's the photo camera, one is the video camera.
Right.
And they've had the GX version, which was the rangefinder version of the photo camera.
Yes.
And so it was just like G7, G8, G9, GH4, GH5, GH6, and now it's G9 Mark II. I don't like, why didn't we go to G10? Do they run out of letters? They can't do 2 letters?
Or did they feel like it wasn't a big enough improvement over the G9?
Who knows? Yep. I mean, everything has improved. This is the body of an S5 Mark II, like literally an S5 Mark II, but with a Micro Four Thirds sensor, and then they sealed up all of the holes so that it would be weather resistant and freeze resistant.
Yeah. I did not realize it was the exact same body.
It's literally the same camera.
Interesting.
Like you can use the accessories and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
So I don't remember if the S5 Mark II has like a wheel and a joystick on the back, but this one does have like all of the features as far as touchscreen, joystick, and wheel. So I don't know about that, but
cool. Walk me through some of the other specs.
Okay, it's a totally new sensor, 25.2 megapixels.
Micro Four Thirds.
Micro Four Thirds, right? So it's up from 20 megapixels.
Okay.
I can't think of a higher megapixel Micro Four Thirds. I think the Olympus the OM system, OM1D, maybe a slightly higher megapixel. Probably should double check that. But basically, like, Micro Four Thirds, it has really, really good IBIS. Like, it's a new system with a new gyro, whatever, and they're saying like 7 or 8 stops of...
I saw, I think 8 stops.
Yeah, which is pretty stinking good. Like, the S5 Mark II had good stabilization. This is supposed to have even better stabilization.
The GH5 was always like the king of IBIS because those Micro Four Thirds sensors are so small. It's really easy to do that. And this seems like it has better IBIS than the GH5.
Yep. And really so, like, this is it's a photo camera. And so, like, what does that get you? And what that is like, if you're shooting on, say, like a 400 millimeter Micro Four Third lens, which full frame equivalent, that's 800 millimeters. It's crazy. You can shoot that handheld and still get crisp shots.
That's crazy.
And like, if you use a tripod or like you maybe like brace the camera a little more, you can shoot these 100 megapixel still images at that length handheld.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, I may be exaggerating. You might not be able to do the 100 megapixels at that length, but like if you put it on a tripod, you can. And what I'm talking about is like they will do this whole sensor shift thing where they'll use that IBIS to like move the sensor around and then take a higher resolution.
Yeah.
And so like you can get 100 megapixels out of a camera that is fairly, I wouldn't say fairly small. It's the size of an S5 Mark II. So it's not a small camera by any means.
Yeah.
But it's competitive in that, like, if you're comparing it to like an A7R5, which I think is the right comparison, is like compare these to a full frame, high resolution camera.
Yeah.
Like, you can basically get equivalent resolution out of it if you don't have moving subjects.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big caveat, right? Like you've got to have a static subject for that.
Yeah. And so like this thing is $1,900, right?
Pretty high.
Which is, you're in the price territory of like an XH2, which is 40 megapixels. You're looking at directly at the S5 Mark II, which is full frame.
Mm-hmm.
Like Canon has things that are full frame and APS-C that are cheaper and like slightly more expensive. I mean, $2,500 is going to get you an R6. Like the A7C2 is $2,200, right? That's 30 megapixels. So like it's right here in this competitive landscape. But what I think is interesting to consider is what I just said of actually compare this to the R5 and compare this to the A7R5.
Yeah.
Because if you grab a 400 millimeter full frame lens and then shoot with it and then crop into the center to get an 100% crop to 800 millimeters, that's basically the same thing as shooting with a G9 II.
That's really interesting.
Because you're getting like a 26-ish megapixel shot at 800 millimeters.
Good point.
But the G9 II is going to take a better picture because it has better stabilization. And then you could even do like your sensor shift thing.
Yeah.
So like if you're in that super telephoto situation, this is like, here's your small, light, very professional kit for shooting super telephoto.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't consider that with the Micro Four Thirds crop, but that's a good point.
You gotta lean into your bennies there. Like, what are you getting out of that crop?
Well, and the other thing you get with the Micro Four Thirds sensor is just how fast it is.
Right.
Because this thing with electronic shutter can do 60 frames per second burst. Or if you fix the focus, like that's with autofocus, if you fix the focus, you can do 75 frames per second.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
60 frame per second raw images is absolutely nuts.
Yeah. It's like a 200 image buffer or something like that. But I mean, that's, if you imagine like go out and shoot wildlife, like you could get some pretty cool shots with your 400 millimeter lens and shooting a, 60 frame per second burst.
And it'll do the buffer. I think you can set it up to like 1 second, which is essentially 6 images.
Yeah.
Sorry, 60 images.
Yep. Yep.
Which, great. Right. So it's like, I mean, this is like, here's your sports, here's your telephoto, here is your action type, photography where you need the reach. You don't want to carry around the biggest lens in the entire world, and you can shoot freaking 60 frames per second.
Yeah.
So it's like, take advantage. Like, why shoot Micro Four Thirds? Like, what's the whole point of like using such a small sensor? Like you're losing dynamic range and all this sort of thing. It's like, here's the stabilization, here's the super fast readout, and here's all this extra reach.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. For me, it's hard to imagine wanting to use Micro Four Thirds just because, I feel like you're constantly fighting that sensor and fighting to get enough light. But if you are in a situation where you have enough light, like you said, I think it does have some advantages. Yeah,
definitely. Like they're doing things like if you can read the sensor faster, you can pull like more dynamic range out of that. We see it with cinema cameras all the time where the Super 35 cameras get more dynamic range than the full frame cameras.
Right.
They're going to be more noisy in low light, but they're going to have better dynamic range.
Right.
And like they're trying to do that here, but I think they're like there's diminishing returns the smaller you go. But we are seeing where like if you're shooting less than like 30, I think it was like 3200 ISO, it will automatically do the DR boost, which is something that the GH6 had that you had to like specifically turn on. And I think the way that worked was like it's basically pulling 2 gains off of the sensor and then combining it into a single image.
Yeah, it's something like that. And it seemed like it actually did work pretty well in the GH6.
Yeah, like it bumps you up. And so I think that like with the G9 Mark II, when you have dynamic range boost on, which is just automatically turns on below like 3200 ISO, you're going to get 14, 15 stops of dynamic range potential out of the sensor. Whereas when it's off, you get like 13. And so it kind of starts to be able to compete with APS-C in full frame as far as dynamic range in well-lit situations.
Yeah. That's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And even though it's a photo camera, the video specs are really not bad.
No, they're not. It's fairly comparable to the GH6.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people
like
are
weirdly
saying,
so. Like why buy a GH6?
It does feel like there are some things that are kind of missing from the like some of the more advanced features that you have in the GH6, but it's basically the same.
Yeah, so it looks like you're getting 5.8K video, 420 10-bit,
Right.
and that's using the full sensor or 4K 120.
Yeah, so that's open gate. You can shoot 5.8K open gate, and that's a 4x3 sensor, and so you can do the anamorphic modes and get actual 4x3 anamorphic.
Nice.
And then from 4x3, and I think if you shoot in like 4K, like 4K 30, 4K 24, you can get 422 10-bit.
Cool.
And so it basically has all of those modes that you would expect out of like an S5 Mark II.
Yeah, you can record ProRes. You can record to SSD.
Right.
Things the XH2 or the XH2S still can't do that, but you can do that on this photo camera.
Yeah, sure can. I think that it limits you in some way. Like if you want to record certain frame rates, you have to record to the SSD because the cards aren't fast enough.
Sure.
And
that's fair.
And you can do V60 card UHS2 in this thing. So it's 2 SD card slots, no CF Express. But if you need the faster readout speed, you have the external recording option to an SSD.
I think that's fine. This is clearly meant more as a photo camera, and if you're trying to really push the video specs, I think having to clamp an SSD on there is not that's not too much of a compromise.
I would basically agree with that. I don't know. I think it's an interesting camera. I have so much trouble with Micro Four Thirds in general as far as like where does it fit?
Yeah.
I can see the reason to compromise from full frame to APS-C. It's like 1.5 crop. Like it's not that much worse. You maybe lose like 1 stop on dynamic range, but you can still get some low depth of field, but you get all of these extra benefits out of the speed. And then it's like the same thing happens from APS-C to 4/3, but I'm never really sold on it anymore. Yeah. Like I guess I don't really need that reach. And I mean, this is kind of one of the coolest Micro Four Thirds cameras we've seen in a while. The Olympus one was the other one, OM system. But it's like, it's still $2,000. The camera body is still the same size. And so really you're only saving on weight is the lenses. But the lenses, if you get the good ones, are crazy expensive. And they're not really being updated. Like if you look at all the new lenses that Lumix has come out with, they're basically all full frame.
Yeah.
And so it's like the Micro Four Thirds system feels like it's aging.
I agree.
And I can't tell if Panasonic is releasing this camera because they still believe in Micro Four Thirds, or if they're releasing this camera because they know that there are still people in that system and they just kind of want to keep it going.
Yeah, I also have that question. I mean, I was like many people, I think I was really disappointed that this event was a new Micro Four Thirds camera and not them announcing S1H Mark II. And yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, why are they still investing in Micro Four Thirds? And I think they talked a pretty big game at that event, saying that they still care about it and it's still important to them and all that. But it's always hard to separate that marketing stuff from reality. And I don't know. I mean, it felt to me before that, it's like Micro Four Thirds is cheaper and smaller than APS-C or full frame, and it's still going to shoot way better than your phone. But now it feels like, you're really not saving that much money or size if this is the same size as an S5 Mark II, and it's a $1,900 camera, and it's like you've got this APS-C and full frame stuff competing at lower price points now, and then you've got things like the iPhone 15 that are really improving phone photography, kind of coming up from below, and it just kind of feels like it's squeezing Micro Four Thirds, and I don't know how much room there is for that anymore.
Yeah, I kind of agree as well. It almost feels like this G9 II was like, we have the GH6, and so like let's just repackage it as a photo camera, and because we have to roll out phase detect autofocus to everything in the lineup now that that's a thing. And so like that was the headline feature here, right? It's like, here's our main photo camera that you love, but now it has phase detect,
right?
But like they're not going to go back and like invigorate the G9. So like let's use the existing body that we have, stick the guts from the GH6 into it, add phase detect, and like maybe this is actually is the simplest camera that they could release.
It is like, I feel like the fact that they used that S5 Mark II body, it kind of like overplays their hand a little bit, where they clearly didn't want to overinvest in creating this.
They didn't want to have to retool the whole thing.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I mean, it makes sense. I've held an S5 Mark II, and that is a great camera design.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great design. It's just, it does feel like it's a bulky thing for a Micro Four Thirds camera.
Well, absolutely, right? I mean, I used to shoot Micro Four Thirds, and one of the main reasons I bought into it was like it was so small. I mean, I think that GX7 that I had is, I mean, it's tiny.
It's
almost
like smaller than an X100V.
Yeah, it's like about X100V size.
Yeah.
It's super compact, and like you throw a 20 millimeter pancake on there, and that's a wonderful little kit, and you get great photos out of it. And like, this isn't that. I mean, this is definitely like they're selling this as like, here's a professional grade, whatever. And I do feel like this is within certain very specific workflows competitive with, I mean, like maybe even a Z8. Like you're going to go shoot a soccer match or something, or a football match. Like you got the range, it's lighter, you have better stabilization. Like you're not quite, with the crop, it's going to be basically the same resolution. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are use cases for it, but it's just feeling like more and more niche.
Agreed. And I think that most people would probably give up the weight savings of the lens and then get a larger sensor because it opens them up to be able to do more things.
Yeah.
They have the option to get low depth of field or really wide shots. And like, you're going to have better, like moire. What's the word for it? Like the moire is going to be less worse on a bigger sensor where those pixels are larger and that sort of thing. I mean, that's always a Micro Four Thirds problem and always a small sensor problem. A company like Fuji gets around it because of X-Trans. You may have heard of it.
I'm not going there today, Lucas. I'm not going there. What concerns me about this camera is I don't know who I would recommend it for.
I mean, for the same price, you can get an S5 Mark II.
Yeah. Why am I not picking that? It's like, I don't know.
And like if they want a really light system, get the OM. Is it the OM1? I swear, like
you're gonna have to look that camera
I'm so outside of this Micro Four Thirds world. I can't even remember the name of that stinking camera. OM Systems. Oh, I think it's the OM1.
I mean, honestly, I'm just thinking, why would I pick this over like a Fuji XS20? Like or a Sony
or an XH2,
a Sony A6700. I mean, there's just so many other cameras that have bigger sensors, a lot more, modern lens options. Just doesn't make sense.
You're picking two cheaper cameras. I mean, this is like R7 territory.
Yeah.
I mean, XH2, like
XT5. I mean, all that stuff.
Yeah. XT5 is a smaller camera with a higher resolution sensor that gets more dynamic range. The new ZF, which we haven't even talked about that one yet.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. I mean, have to put that one on next week's show. I think
that one's smaller, looks cooler, and is full frame. And anyways, Daniel, that camera is pretty stinking cool.
Getting off topic here,
right? I think that the OM camera, it's the OM1, it's just like slightly smaller, and it does similar stuff. Like you can do an 80 megapixel giant thing. It has really good stabilization, like. Very competitive to this, but I think that like maybe if you're looking for a smaller system, OM1 might be a better option.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it. This is coming in at a really weird price point for what it is.
I mean, it is cheaper. The OM1 is $2,000 and this one's $1,900. So I don't know if you're in that high end Micro Four Thirds world. There's two cameras and it's this one and it's the OM1, and I think like now that this has face detect. You get way cooler video features because it's a Panasonic, and like these burst rates are unmatched.
Yeah, that they are.
I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to talk about because it's like I can in no way do I ever see myself buying this camera, and so I'm like, how would I sell this? I have no idea.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting. I'm glad to see like this. Like the cool things that you can do in Micro Four Thirds that aren't possible yet with larger sensors because of processing limitations. It's cool to see developments there as like a proving ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what Micro Four Thirds has been for a long time, as a proving ground. Because I mean, like as an example, for a long time, IBIS was so much more effective on Micro Four Thirds, and now we're starting to see that be better. I mean, like the S5 and the S1H are have way better IBIS for being full frame than what we've previously seen. I do feel like Panasonic takes some of those learnings from Micro Four Thirds and applies it to the rest of the lineup.
Right. It does seem that has slowed down in a way. we haven't seen the dual gain dynamic range thing come into any sort of like full frame or APS-C cameras that I can think of. And so like we're waiting for that to work its way up the line. The better IBIS. I don't even know if you're going to be able to because of like how the capacity of those motors and like just being able to move around the mass of the sensor. Maybe like sensors get lighter or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, sure, it's going to be cool when you can shoot 60 frame per second raw out of like a 40 megapixel full frame sensor. Like that's going to be really, really cool. And maybe at that point, the Panasonic's just going to be shooting like raw at 120, which is basically video, high speed video in raw. So I don't know. It's an interesting camera, but it doesn't feel like it's as interesting as it could be.
Yeah.
Like that they're split with their resources, and maybe they're spending all their time developing the S1H Mark II.
Yeah. I can hope.
Yeah. I mean, that one's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I don't think we're going to see it this year, though.
Oh, man. It's going to make my list at the end of the year really hard.
Yeah. Sure is.
So, I mean, did anything else come out with this? Did they release like new lenses or anything?
They kind of did. There's not much to say here. They announced a new version of the 35 to 100 f2.8.
Cool.
They said the word Leica a million times because they really like to tout that. But it has improved image quality, so whatever.
Sure, great.
And then they announced an update to the 100 to 400 f4 to f6.3. But it only has one new feature, which is that it supports the 2x teleconverter. So that's where you're getting like
a 1600 millimeter equivalent.
Yes.
Dang.
Yes. Yeah. So there must be something to what you said about that really long reach, because got that going for them.
Yeah, with an effective aperture of 25, I guess. But ooh,
yeah.
That's cool though.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about one more thing today.
Okay.
Let's look at these RF cinema primes.
Finally.
This is something that came out. This is another topic that came out that same Tuesday with everything else. And there were just so many things we couldn't get to all of them. And this one I thought was funny because this is like right up the alley of this show.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, weeks later, finally talking about it, but there's just been so much news.
I am more excited about these Cineprimes than I am about the G9 Mark II.
Oh, you don't say.
I don't even shoot RF. I don't know why I care.
All right. Well, tell me about them.
Okay. They came out with, so Canon makes some cine lenses, and their current lineup is EF and PL.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making the C70, and they're making their C300s and all this stuff. Red uses RF. It's time for them to come out with some cine primes on their RF mount.
I mean, yeah, that's what I've been saying. They've got the R5C. That's an interesting one. It's so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they've got a lot of cinema cameras.
So here it is. Here's the suite. And they even updated a couple of their cine zooms, which those cine zooms, Daniel, like they're like APS-C range, but they're like T1.8.
Huh.
And I'm like, if I could buy that lens for my Fuji and get a T1.8 zoom that's like 20, what is it? It's like 23 millimeter to like 71 millimeter or something. I don't even have it in front of me, but it's like that, but in T1.8. I know it's like crazy expensive. I was like, what? Come on, Fuji.
Yeah.
Where's my version of that lens? Anyway, the primes. Okay. These are all roughly, what is it? They are 118 millimeters, like physically diameter in the largest point. And they're 118 millimeters long.
Okay.
All of them.
Interesting.
They are all 105 millimeter filter thread.
So they're first off, that's huge.
Yes, it is.
And kind of has the classic Cinema Prime thing where they're all the same size.
They're all the same size. Fantastic. Most of them are about 2.8 pounds.
Okay.
So the lighter ones are 2.6. The heavier ones are 3.3. But within a half a pound of each other, one way or the other.
Okay.
Unless you're going from the lightest to the heaviest, then it's a little closer to 1 pound. So all very similar sizes.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Box checked. Here's a kit. They got you covered for 14, 20, 24, 35, 50, 85, and 135.
That's a pretty complete range.
That's all of it, man. You got ultra wide to telephoto.
There's nothing obvious missing from that.
Yeah, I can't think of anything. I mean, maybe you could squeeze a 40 mil in there,
I mean,
but
sure,
don't
you
need
could
it.
you could nitpick, but I mean that's a good range.
It's fantastic. This is exactly the range that I would want. They even added a 20. I mean, if they did 16 and 24,
Mm-hmm. That would have been fine.
no one would have complained.
Yep.
But they went 14 and 20.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. And here's the one complaint. These are not all the same T-stop.
Right.
The fastest is T1.3. The slowest is T2.2, and that's on the 135.
Isn't the 14 slow?
Oh, right. Sorry. The 14 is a T3.1.
Yep.
And that may be because I typoed it, and it's actually 1.3.
It could be.
I think it's actually that. So the T, I typed that backwards. You're basically 1.3 for the fastest. Most of them are 1.3 to 1.5, and then the 135 is T2.2.
Yeah, I guess that they probably had to fit into that size window.
Yeah, there's no way that you're going to make a 135 millimeter lens that size at less than T2.2. There's no way.
Yeah.
I don't know why they just didn't make them all T1.5.
That is a little weird.
I bet what it is like they did the optical formula, and these probably have very similar f-stops. And like maybe they probably used similar designs to their RF glass that they have already developed, like their L series. I have no proof of this. Like I tried to see if they based these on anything of like here's a previous optical formula that they used, but what I would assume is like here these all are essentially f1.8, or 1.4 somewhere around there, and then the T-stop is different because that's an actual calculation.
Sure. That's reasonable.
relative.
I think it's a good theory.
So, still great. They touted things like 8K support resolution, which absolutely needed in new Cine lenses.
Sure. Yeah, at this point, we're starting to see that in more cameras.
Yep. So that's fantastic. They talked about skin tone because they're Canon. They have 11 blades, and they're saying that because it's an odd number of blades, you're going to get better fall off, and then the bokeh's very round, even at like the widest aperture.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any footage off of these yet, but I am curious to see how they look, especially compared to those new Cook lenses that just came out that are similarly priced.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest competitor to these, honestly.
They were nearly the same price. The Cook is also full frame, if I recall, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, because they're for like RF and L and all that.
And like the thing about like these RF lenses, like supposedly they're really good at ghosting and like they're very, very good looking lenses.
Yeah.
The thing about those Cooks is like if you look at if you're just obsessed with the way that out of focus looks in your images, and you look at like the round bokeh balls in your like footage off of a Cook lens, they look basically perfect. Like there's no onion ringing, there's no soap bubbling. They're just smooth and delicious and like just so good. And I'm curious if these RF lenses compete because they kind of talked about like our out of focus is like really good and you have really round bokeh, but am I going to look at that and am I going to see like onion ring inside of it, or is it going to be like just the most creamiest, delicious thing I've ever seen?
I mean, they've got some pretty clear competition here, so that they better, right? Like, it's got to match up.
I guess we'll see. So, I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. I did mention that these are, coverage for full frame. That I was looking through the information on their website. Nowhere in any of the press releases or any of the spec documents that I've looked at do they list the image circle of these lenses.
That's surprising.
And I was frustrating because I'm like, that's a base spec.
Yeah.
Like, what is your image circle?
You're going to need to know if you can put this on your GFX 100, the Deuce.
Well, you can't because it's RF. It's too close of a flange distance, right? You're not gonna be able to. Yeah, I did think about that because I was looking at red cameras like the V Raptor, and they're like they talked about using those Prima Vista Fuji lenses, and which have a larger image circle than full frame. They're not quite medium format, but they're not like 65 mil size, but they are significantly bigger than full frame as far as image circle. Anyway, if you go look at a red camera, the sensor size for an 8K V Raptor is like 41 millimeters by 21 and a half millimeters. That's wider than full frame.
Interesting.
And what Canon says is that these RF primes are designed for full frame, large format cameras. And I can't tell if they mean full frame, but also that's large format if you're talking about video, but we have to use both terms because people don't understand the difference, or if it's full frame and large format.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we're talking about video, large format is anything bigger than Super 35.
It is confusing.
It is confusing. And so it reads like these are for like 36 millimeter by 24 millimeter coverage. And what I was trying to find out is like, is the image circle big enough to cover an 8K V-Raptor with the large format sensor, which is that 40 millimeter width?
It feels to me like it would be such a miss if it wasn't.
It has to.
Because, I mean, all these red cameras are coming out with RF. This feels like the perfect thing. You're like, now we've got RF cinema primes from Canon. Like, this is going to pair really well with my red camera. And if it doesn't cover the sensor, that's a problem. I mean, I would bet quite a bit of money that it does cover it, because it just doesn't make sense otherwise.
Yeah, I would expect that you're right. And I think that's probably what they meant by large format. And they did mention like third-party cameras, like other cinema cameras that use this mount, which is red.
Yeah.
And so I think that they very specifically were like, these are for red cameras. Use them on your V-Raptor.
Yeah. Give us money too.
Yeah. But then also they have, so like these have the electronics in them. Like they're fully manual primes for cinema stuff. There's no autofocus or nothing. And they have great focus throws. 300 degrees focus throw. Wonderful. They have electronics in them so that if you connect them to a Canon camera, they will do like peripheral illumination correction and like spot correction, edge distortion. And so like if you have that 14 millimeter 1.3, it will do the lens correction for you in camera, even if like you're shooting in RAW or whatever, to like your C70.
Well, that's a plus over the Cook lenses.
It is. The Cooks have nothing like that. Advantage of the Cook is it ships with all the mounts in the box, so you can put it on anything.
Yep.
I would still buy the Cooks over these. Like,
if they're about the same price, right?
I think that they're about the same price. They're like, man, from what I saw, it was like $4,000 or something.
Yeah.
So I would still like, if I was going to invest in these, man, having one that says Cook, especially if you're going to rent the gear, like if you're like, you have the lenses and you're like selling yourself and your equipment, and someone was like, oh man, but I really want to use this camera, you can swap the mounts and use the Cook lenses on basically anything. Versus this, it's like RF. So I don't know, but I'm curious to see if they worked with red, so that if you are shooting on like a Monstro or a V-Raptor or something, that you can get the lens correction built in. And that would be super, super cool.
It would.
But like they didn't say anything to that effect. And I feel like Canon doesn't work with anybody because they're Canon, but also like, why is red still sticking with the RF mount? And it's like, yeah, I guess you can swap out to a PL mount if you're a red camera. You just take it off. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know.
Very cool.
It is cool. You know, I think that somebody who has a C70 or an R5C or something, these lenses still feel like they're pretty expensive for those cameras, because it's like the same price as the camera. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see people using these on Canons. Yeah,
I think that if you have like a Canon like setup, like you shoot a lot of videos, or you have a production company, or you're a studio and you got a lot of Canon stuff, boom, here's your RF Cine glass.
Sure.
And you can use it with all the Canon cameras that you have around, and like it works great for those kind of setups, and like your production house, or if you're renting them, like it would be a great ad for renting.
Yeah, I agree.
I haven't talked about the like best feature of these cameras.
Which is what?
The numbers on the side are white, but in the dark, they glow.
That is pretty cool.
It is super cool.
That's a clever feature.
Yeah.
I like it.
That does it.
Need more glow in the dark stuff on cameras.
That's what I'm saying. Glow in the dark, pull your focus. Perfect.
Love it.
Just really into it.
Yep.
So I think that's it. I think we covered everything on these lenses. I mean, you have any final thoughts on them?
Not really. I think they make sense. It's coming out at a really interesting time with those Cook SP3 lenses just releasing.
Yep.
I think the Cooks outshine them a little bit, but I'm curious to see. I guess I'm curious to see how these are received and what people use them for.
Same. I feel like Cook has more clout.
Yeah, they do, but I mean, at the same time, I always like to see more competition. You know,
definitely.
So I think it's good.
And I mean, when we talked about the Cook of like, you know, all these filmmakers and stuff kind of growing up in like a mirrorless world, or shooting on cheaper cinema cameras that are, you know, here's a camera that's sub $10,000. Like maybe they're shooting on an Ursa or a C70 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like, getting into where they actually need like sets of primes and being able to buy primes that are less than $30,000 for a kit or something, or being able to rent primes where they're not paying like $1,000 a weekend or something.
Yeah.
And so it's like having like cinema grade glass to be able to use for those cheaper productions and like economize film making in this way. It's great to see it. And I felt like Cook kind of pushed that whole concept forward by like, here are really, really, really good cinema primes for $4,000 a piece.
Right.
And Canon doing the same thing just legitimizes that. And I think it just kind of helps push everybody forward.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm into it.
Me
really
too.
pumped about it.
Yep. I think it's great.
Okay. And then I think I moved everything else off of our topic list today. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think we've almost caught up on all the announcements from that 1 week in September.
Jeez. Yeah, we should have to get to everything else that came out after that.
Yeah. We're trying to catch up.
We haven't talked about the new GoPro. We haven't talked about the new DJI drone.
Yep.
Like what?
Nikon
ZF.
ZF.
They're not FCF.
Is that what it is?
Yes, the ZF.
Yeah. A lot of stuff. A lot more camera gear ahead.
Yep. Just stay tuned or whatever. I don't know. Is that what you say?
I think that's what you say.
Cool.
That's what we're going to go with.
Got it.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com. And you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.